Hello, my name's Carl Irwin, and this is a tutorial concerning lens flare creation in Blender. And a lot of people have asked me after watching some of my YouTube videos how I achieve some of the lens flares that I've created. And truth be told, there are an infinite number of ways to create lens flares in lens flare effects inside of Blender. Blender actually has its own lens flare capability connected to the halo texture, and you can get some mixed results using that by enabling a single vertice with a halo texture on it, and also turning on the lens flare option and trying some of the different seeds that are part of that lens flare option. And some people complain about how bad it looks, and quite frankly, I found that if you put a little bit of time and effort into setting up your lens flare using the halo texture, you can get some really good results. But if you're one of those people that really does not like that mode that's been implemented in the Blender internal render engine for the creating lens flares, fear not, that's not exactly what this tutorial is about. I want to show you a different way to render lens flares. Another way to render a lens flare is to use the compositor and use some different compositing nodes, and you can get some very good results doing that by using geometric shapes and then using the compositor and adding blur and glare and all those kinds of things. But that's not what this tutorial is about either. Instead, this is the implementation of lens flares via the OpenGL rendering capability of Blender. And as you've seen on some of my recent videos and some of my recent tutorials, I've got this thing about OpenGL lately, and trying to use the OpenGL capabilities of render simply because it renders very fast. And I don't have very powerful computers, so the faster the render, the better, and the lower the system resources, the better. So this is actually an OpenGL render, and you can see right here in the video sequence editor, this is what the final output looks like. And as I go through the timeline down here in my final composite, if I click ahead, you can see it takes about 4 seconds or so to refresh, and you can see this is a OpenGL preview, and it only takes a couple of seconds to render this full frame. In terms of rendering in OpenGL, clicking on the OpenGL render, you can see that a single frame renders in about 1 second. So that's a single frame rendering using the OpenGL render option, and that's incredibly fast. A lens flare composite like this, rendered using the Blender internal render engine or even cycles, would probably take about maybe 1.5 to 2 minutes per frame just to render this frame. So OpenGL is considerably faster if you set it up right. So let's take a look at how this is done. How is this achieved? Before I jump in and look at the Blender file, I want to point out very quickly that what you'll need to do is create a library of elements. So this is a library of elements that I've created, and you can see there's a bunch of different images in here. If I scroll through, you can see all of these images that I've created. Here's an image of color, kind of a color gradient, and I'll show you what I use that for in a minute. This is kind of a light rays image, and just some different elements and different things, different kinds of images that you can use to render out different components of a lens flare. Some streaks with dots in there, and a couple of these kind of optical images, and these are created actually using Blender. Many of these are created using a single halo, a single vertice with a halo texture on it, such as this. This is just a halo texture with the points enabled, and I rendered out various versions. Here's one with 4 points, one with 5, 6, 7, 8 points. These are the rings enabled on the halo texture, and this is 4 rings, this is 2 rings. This is the lines on a halo texture, and what I did is I rendered out as many lines as I could, the maximum number, and then in GIMP photo editor, image editor, I just got rid of the center. I put a mask around the center, so it gave me this hoop kind of figure. These are just some geometric shapes that I rendered in Blender and then tweaked them in GIMP. And then what you can do is you can take these images, once you've created a bunch of these library images, and you can composite them together to create more complex images. So this is a circle image that's flattened out on the y-axis to make kind of a wide streak on the x-axis, and some lines and some rings and glow and all these different things that I composited together to make these images that look like you know, complex anamorphic type lens flare figures. And I made a number of these, and these are just flat images, black and white images, and I created a library of these images that I can then use later on. This actually is the same image. This is just a black and white version of it, and then this is the same image applied to a gradient in GIMP and set to multiply. So just various images that you can create to use for our lens flare. So this is the first thing you're going to need to do, is create a library of these different images for use in our lens flare. The next thing that you'll do, and actually let me show you a video very quickly of what this will look like animated. So let's open this up. This is a video, just an animated version of this lens flare. You can see the flare is moving around the screen, and you see that there's this caustic image that's moving around this element, and these other streaks that are moving, and some other elements in there, and you have this anamorphic streak and some of these dots that show up. And if you've ever seen an anamorphic lens flare, you would recognize some of these types of figures. And again, these are just elements that I composited together using GIMP or using Blender, using some of those other elements that I created from halo textures, and just painting some of these textures in GIMP or in Photoshop if you wish. You can see here's this hoop that I created, and we found a way to deform this hoop inside of our lens flare, and I'll show you how that's done so that it follows our flare, but kind of elongates in this oval type texture. So this is this is not too bad, really, not too shabby if it's composited in the right way. And you have also this stationary dots. You can see these out of focus dots that look like they might be on the camera lens, maybe some moisture or some scratches or something like that that are on the lens, imperfections that are illuminated by our flare as the flare moves around the lens, around the frame. And I created a texture just for that, actually. If we go back to the library, lens flare elements, here's this texture that I created. And what I did is I started with this, which is a cloud texture in Blender set to a very, very high contrast, and then I opened it up in the compositor, and I used a defocus node, and I came up with this, and then I set the defocus settings a little higher, and I came up with this one. So you're going to want to make some of these images too that you can use for your lens artifacts, for your lens flares. So come up with your library first, and this actually here is an optical picture. This is a marble that had a lot of scratches on it, and I put it in front of a camera, and I shined a a light through it, and then I took a photograph, and then I increased the contrast in a photo editor and came up with this image. So lots of different ways that you can come up with these images. This is just a single halo vertice, halo texture on a vertice, set to different softness and hardness, and I created these. These are good to create the streaks, the wide streaks. You can bring this into GIMP and flatten it on the y-axis and come up with a long streak on the x-axis. So, and also you could use this for a glow, perhaps, in your composite. So anyway, come up with this library first. Once you have your library, you can then create your flare. So let's go back to the default view very quickly and show you what's happening. You can see this background image that I have in there. I don't have it enabled in the final video sequence editor, but I have it in here, and in the 3D view, and this is just a plane in the scene. If you go back to the camera view, I have a vertice, and the vertice represents the center of our lens flare. And what I've done is I imported each one of these elements that I wanted to use, and I set them in different space, in Z space, so that as the vertice moves around, you can see that these elements will also move. And I set each individual element on a different scene layer. So for example, this is the caustic scene, and what the caustic is it's just a torus geometry. You can add a mesh and add a torus, which looks like a donut, and I extended it on the z-axis, and I set on this torus a reflection texture. So if you go to the material and add a texture to it, and you set the texture, it's just an image, and the image is these rings that I created in Blender using a halo texture. I set this as a reflection. So in GLSL shading, and go back to the camera view, as this moves around the screen, this torus will show the reflection of these rings, and it makes kind of an interesting kind of texture as it moves around, and it reflects differently, and it kind of looks like a caustic imperfection in the lens. So that's how I created that. And if I was to view this in render view, you can see that there's a black background, and this kind of morphs and moves around in different ways, and this is how I create my caustic image. Updates very, very quickly using the GLSL and OpenGL rendering mode. Let's go to another view, another element. Let's go to the halo element. This is my favorite one. Now this looks really interesting if you look at it in only render view, but if I turn this off, you can see what it is. Let's move around. This is a cone. It's just a cone, and I have this hoop texture mapped to it. It's not a reflection, it's just a texture that's been applied to it as a material, and the apex of the cone is at the vertice, and you can see as the vertice moves around, the whole cone is just moving in the scene. But from camera view, you can see how this works. It kind of morphs this texture around, because the section that is furthest away from the camera seems to move much more slowly than the apex, which is much closer to the camera as this vertice moves around. So you can see how we created that, and if we set it to only render, you can see what that looks like. Anyway, what you do is you put all of these elements into one scene, and then you are going to create multiples of the scene. So what you do is you just click the plus sign to add a new scene, and when you create the new scene, you click Link Objects. And once you've created enough scenes to cover all of your elements, you delete all of the elements except for the one that you want to remain inside of the scene. So you end up with all of these scenes, each one having the empty and the element tied to the empty. And then if you go back to your main scene, which in this case only has the empty applied to it, if you keyframe your empty, move it around, it will update on all of the other scenes, and that's very, very important for animating our lens flare. So now you're all set to composite. So to composite, we'll go to our main layer, and with just the vertice, and we will jump to the video sequence editor, and takes a couple seconds for this to compile together. Now I can add scenes and composite them using the blending modes for each scene. And I can use multiple scenes, and I can use, for example, actually, why don't I do this? I'm just going to select everything. Whoops. I'll hit select everything and hit X to delete. We'll erase everything from here. X to delete, and X to delete, X to delete. We'll get rid of everything and we'll start over. And I'll show you how this works. Okay, so we've got nothing. We're completely empty. And I'll go back to the beginning, actually jump ahead a little bit, and I'll add a scene. So first I'll add just my flare scene. This is with my background. I'm going to disable it. We're not going to want to see that right away. And I'll add, let's add an image real quick. I want to go to my lens flare elements, and I'm going to add this. We'll add our lens grit 3. I want to show you a couple tricks here real quick. And let's find where this is at. It's way up here. You can set, when you select your image, your frame length and starting point, and also your channel. So you probably should do that right at the beginning. Let me slide this over so it starts on frame 1. And we'll extend this all the way to the end. So this is our lens grit. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to disable this for a second, and I'm going to enable our city scene. And what I want to do is I'm going to add a glow to this. So we're going to select our flare scene. I'm going to click Add Effect Strip Glow, and you can see that it'll add this glow. And I'm going to increase the blur to let's say to 10, and then I'm going to set it to only boost, and I'm going to decrease the threshold down to 0. So what we're looking at is a blurred version of our city scene, and I'm going to set the multiply to 2 so it's a little bit brighter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select our lens grit, and then I'm going to hit Shift and select our glow layer, and I'm going to click Add Effect Strip Multiply. And what it will do is it will add a layer. What I'm going to do is I'll go back to my glow layer, and I'm going to disable it. It will add a layer that multiplies those two things. So you can see what it's doing is it's illuminating the lens grit using the light from the glow layer. And if I set this to add, it will composite it on top. And actually I'm going to increase the multiply setting. I'll click 3. So actually let's go up to 5. You can see what happens is now it illuminates all the light spots from our background scene. It will illuminate the lens grit in those areas. So the idea is that you can use these transfer modes and these effects to have one layer affect another one. So for example, if let me get rid of this here. If I were to get rid of that glow, let's disable this background layer, and let's add another scene. I'm going to add the glow scene from our lens flare, and this is just an image that follows around the lens flare, but it's just a big white kind of glowy image, and this is a big plane that has the big circle glow on it. I'm going to select the lens grit, and then I'm going to select the glow, and I'm going to click Add Effect Strip and click on Multiply. And now if I click through different areas in our animation, as the lens flare moves around the scene, it will illuminate our lens grit. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. I'm going to select this and change it to add. And I'm going to click on the glow and turn it off. So now all we're looking at is this lens grit illuminated. Now I could make this even more interesting. Let me move this up. By adding another image, I'm going to add an image from our lens flare elements. I'm going to add a chromatic gradient. So let's add this, and let me fix this here. We want start frame 1, end frame 250, channel. Let's put it on channel 5, and here is our chromatic gradient. Let me move this down here. So you can see what that looks like. It's just this gradient figure. And I'm going to take our multiply layer. I'll select the multiply layer. Actually, I'll select the chromatic gradient layer, hit shift, select the multiply layer, and I'm going to add another multiply layer. I'm going to select multiply from my effect strip, and you can see what happens. Now it is using our effect, but it is multiplying the color gradient. And this is a little bit too harsh, so why don't I go to my color chromatic gradient, and I'm going to turn down the saturation to 0.4. So now it's not quite as harsh, but I still get some of that color in it. So you can see what I'm doing. I'm just adding up these layers and creating new layers by having them interact in the video sequence editor. So this is kind of quick compositing. Let me turn off my color gradient, and I'll set this to add, and I'll move it up. Let's add another scene to this. I'm going to add let's add the core scene to this, and I want to set that to add. And here's my core scene, and you can see as we move through, my lens flare will slide around, and already it looks pretty good. Let's add another one to that. We'll add, actually, let's color correct that. Let's make it blue, more like an anamorphic type lens color. And we'll select the blue channel and slide it up. And too much, slide it back a little bit. And let's set this to add. And on top of that, let's add another scene. Let's add the rays scene. So here is the rays scene. I'm going to set this to add. It's a little bit harsh, so I'm going to set the opacity down to 0.3. Let's set it higher, 0.5. Anyway, you can see how we're compositing this together. Another trick, let's add another one here. Let's add another scene. We'll add the shine. And what I did on this element, and this element looks like these lines that I created using the halo texture. Made this for my library. What I did, if you see as I move through, this is going to change size. So sometimes it's smaller, sometimes it's hard to see it, but sometimes it's smaller, sometimes it's bigger. What I did is on this scene and on this element, I added a scale effect, and I added a noise effect to that scale on the X and Y axis, and the noise changes the scale throughout the scene. So sometimes it's bigger, sometimes it's smaller. It adds kind of a shimmery change. It adds a shimmer effect by changing the scale of it. Let's set this to let's get all of these so they're starting on frame 1, and let's set this also to add. And I'm going to add a color curves adjustment, and we'll increase the red and increase the green, make it kind of a yellowy reddish color, and it's a little bit too overwhelming, so I'm going to change the opacity to 0.5. Anyway, you can see how we add all of these pieces together, and eventually we come up with a lens flare. One quick trick that you can use, let's add the caustic image. Let me add the scene, and we'll find our caustic image and set it to layer 1. And you can see, if we hit add, it's right up next to our lens flare. We don't want it. We want it to be on the opposite end. of that flare, of that point. So what we can do is go to that layer and select flip X and Y. And now, as we move through the scene, this image, of course it doesn't look very good because I haven't changed the color. You want to color correct that and maybe even add a glow to it or something like that. But you can see what happens is that as we move through the scene, this caustic element will now move in the opposite axis of the flare or originating point. Okay. Anyway, so we're just going to add all of our elements together, composite it together nicely, and we end up with that lens flare that we looked at the beginning. So this is the quick and dirty way to create. Well, it's not even that dirty because it looks pretty nice. This is the quick way to create lens flares, lens flare elements in Blender using OpenGL rendering. You can also time remap. If you look at some of my other video tutorials, I talk about this, but you can do some time remapping. Let me find my properties, so that it will create more frames, subframes that you can then render out, let's say 500 frames of this animation by setting this new to 200. And you get twice as many frames within the same animation sequence, and then you can offset those in another composition by 1 frame and set the opacity. You should go look at some of my other tutorials and I talk about how to do that. You're creating a poor man's motion blur by oversampling it and then offsetting it in another composition. So you can create motion blur using OpenGL by creating more frames than what you need and then changing the speed at the end. I know it sounds very confusing, but just go look at some of those other tutorials that I have, particularly my first OpenGL rendering tutorial where I discuss that. So you can create motion blur. You could also use another program that I have found called Slow-Mo Video. If you look that up, do Google search for it. It runs in Linux and Windows, and you can do time remapping using slow-mo video on your final video output. This is also for video that you shoot just on a camera, straight raw video. You can actually create what looks like high-speed slow motion video, and you can also add motion blur using this program too. So that's another way to make your OpenGL renders look better. To render this out, OpenGL, and then run it through slow-mo video. It's just a couple of seconds per frame, adding effects and motion blur to it, and you can get some pretty amazing results. So anyway, this is my method for creating lens flare in OpenGL, and hopefully you find this useful and you find a good use for it. One other idea, just before I hang up here, is that you could create a lens flare project and save it, and then whenever you're ready to use it, open it up, and let's say you import some video and you track a point, a light point. So use the tracking feature in Blender and track a 2D point, and then parent your empty to that tracking point, and then you can composite your lens flare on top of your video. So that's might be a good use for it. So it gets you some pretty amazing, pretty good results using the OpenGL function. And again, it just renders so fast using the OpenGL output. Just 1 second, only 1 or 2 seconds on a pretty low-end computer to render this out, as opposed to 1 to 2 minutes using the Blender internal or the Cycles render engine. So anyway, some ideas, things for you to think about, and the opportunities are endless. There's many ways that you can composite all of this together without even using the compositor, just in the video sequence editor. And anyway, this is just a method that I've been playing around with lately, and I've been pretty pleased with the results. So hopefully you find this useful and you find some uses for it in your own work. So good luck with this, and happy blending.